So these nuggets are made from chicken, but they're made to emulate the taste of like non-chicken nuggets. So these nuggets are made from chicken, but they're made to emulate the taste of non-chicken nuggets. Dope. Let's boost that sound quality. Emulate the taste of non-chicken nuggets. Emulate the taste of non-chicken nuggets. Dope. Non-chicken nuggets. Non-chicken nuggets. But they're made to emulate the taste of vegan nuggets. Sounds tasty.
Hello.
Hello.
Welcome to Podcast Interviewing 101. Hello, everybody tuning in. I'm Christiana. I'm the community manager here at Descript, and I'm joined by Ashley, our wonderful managing editor and podcast veteran. How you doing, Ashley?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to get this started.
I'm so excited as well, and I'm excited that we are joined by now over 500 people have signed up. We hit it. That's amazing. Thank you all for being here. We have an amazing topic today, and we have an amazing host and guest in Ashley. I've been waiting to get an hour dedicated to just ask you a million questions since we started working together. So I'm personally very lucky. So we're going to jump in just a second. But before we do that, some brief housekeeping, if you will all indulge me, so that we know what we're getting into today. This is what we're going to cover during Podcast Interviewing 101. Welcome, check. We're already winning. We're going to talk about how to get the guests, how to get the right guests for your podcast, how to nail those interview questions, remote recording, all the tips and tricks, and then we'll finish up with some Q&A from our lovely audience. Then here's just some reminders. Maybe this is your first time watching something in Crowdcast. So below you'll see the Ask a Question section. Any questions you want me to ask Ashley throughout this event, throw them in there. I'll be looking. I'll bring them up on screen. And then use the chat for reactions, commentary. Right now, if you're just joining, tell us where you're tuning in from and tell us what your podcast is about or what you would like it to be about if you haven't started yet, because all levels are welcome here. If we freeze, which sometimes happens in Crowdcast, just hit that refresh button. But we're also streaming on YouTube right now. So if you're having a tough time on Crowdcast, jump over to YouTube. And yes, this is recorded. We will be sending it out in a follow-up email. And it's going to YouTube literally right now. So you could go watch it again right after this, a little double feature anytime. We've got an awesome Discord where you can continue the conversation after this. We'll send that link in the chat, but it's also right here on screen. And if you want more of this sort of creator chat, Ashley's team has put together an amazing blog, Creator HQ, where there are resources galore on all of the things we're talking about and just about anything else you could want to learn about. And lastly, you might be wondering, what's Descript? Or maybe you use Descript for your podcast. We are an audio and video editor. So we try to be the best friends of all content creators and make it super easy to edit content. If you are looking for a new editor for your pod, you can try Descript for free with Interview 30 at checkout. And all that information will be in the follow-up email that I send out right after the event. So I think that's it. I think that's all the housekeeping. Got it through so quickly. We've got folks tuning in from all over Wyoming, Canada, Minnesota, Hawaii. Okay.
Awesome.
A little bit jealous of them right now because it's a cloudy day here in Portland. But I think we're ready to get off to the races and talk about what we're here to talk about. But I thought before we jump into like the actual content here, Ashley, I'd love to hear more about your background in podcasting and the different podcasts you've worked on and just sort of your journey into becoming a host.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my journey to becoming a host started in around 2016. I got a job at a place called Curiosity as a science writer, and I would write articles about science, every day. I became the managing editor there, and then we started a podcast. And so me and my co-host Cody Goff started a podcast called Curiosity Daily. That podcast ended up being acquired by Discovery, and then 1,000 episodes later, I went on to start working at Descript. So I have that long history of being a science podcaster, and then also while I was hosting that show, kind of during the pandemic, I wanted to kind of get my hands dirty with all of the steps of the podcasting process, because what I did mostly there was the kind of the content. What I wanted to do the editing, I wanted to do like everything I want to do the publishing, and so I started my own podcast called Taboo Science, and actually the trailer for season 3 just dropped today, so that's very exciting.
I watched
And
it. It was
yeah,
awesome.
you did? Oh, good. Yes, I'm super excited about that. And in the meantime, I've also been I'm actually currently a co-host on another podcast called Spellbound and Gagged with Ellen
Cool.
Weatherford. You might know her from a wonderful podcast called Just the Zoo of Us. And
Sweet.
I have also been an interviewer for the American Geophysical Union. This one's a little bit more like under wraps. I interviewed probably, gosh, I think it was like 50 scientists for their podcast and for StoryCorps. So a lot of those interviews are up on the StoryCorps website.
That's
so I've
awesome.
done a lot of interviewing, I've done a lot of podcasting, and I'm really excited to share, what I've done.
Super cool. That's awesome. So you talked a lot about like the hosting side and content. Have you been involved like with the editing side as well? Like what's your relationship like with that?
Yeah. So for
Okay, cool.
Curiosity Daily, I edited all of the interviews that we did. So we would
Wow.
we would air it was a daily show, so we would air one interview a week. And so every week I would take that maybe a 45-minute interview and cut it down to the juiciest parts
Yeah.
to like 3 minutes, which is a real challenge to
Whoa.
do when you have so
Totally.
much content. But
That's
yeah,
awesome.
so that was my job there. Yeah.
Cool. Sweet. Wow. Well, folks, we truly have a veteran with us. I'm super excited to talk about this with you then. So yeah, thanks for that background. I think we can kind of jump right in to our questions. And our first section is all about how to get the guest and how to get the right guest for your podcast. Why do you think that that's so important? Why is like the right guest so pivotal for a good interview?
Yeah. Well, number one, I think every podcaster knows that there are a ton of podcasts out there. I think it's like 1 million new shows are made every year, which is kind of an
Yeah.
intimidating number.
Totally.
So you really, you want to stand out.
Right.
And an interviewer, like a guest, can really make or break an episode if they're not, personable, if they're not interesting. Like that's kind of it for your episode. Nobody's going to want to listen to it. So you really want to find someone who knows their stuff, who is really interesting to listen to, and can maybe get you some more followers, hopefully too, because they might have a good audience.
Totally.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So, and I feel like the concept of identifying the right guest for your show, because you could find someone with a huge audience, but maybe has nothing to do with your topic, or isn't quite right. So I'm curious what your take is on like a good rule of thumb for identifying the right guest for your show.
Yeah. I mean, so the big thing about choosing the right guest is sort of you need to kind of know what that is even before you publish your first episode or do your first interview, because it's in the show conception phase when you're thinking about what your show is and what it's about and what you want to bring your audience. If you really niche down and figure out like what your POV is, you're gonna know who the right guest is.
Right.
And so that's really important in that phase. And then once you're actually looking for individuals who can actually come on your show, the best, my rule of thumb is they need to be interesting, or they need to have a big audience that they can send your way,
Right.
preferably both. That's like that's the best guest, is when they have both of those things going for them.
Cool. Okay, that makes sense. Two boxes to check right there.
Yeah,
awesome. So cool. Is that the main things that you think you should keep in mind when evaluating like potential guests, audience size, interesting? Is there anything else that you think is important there?
Yeah, so it depends on what kind of show you have. If your show is about, it's maybe a science show that goes deeper into a topic, you're going to want to have a scientist or a researcher, someone who is an expert in that topic.
Yeah.
Or if you are just looking for giving your audience advice, you might want to get a practitioner in the field. Maybe you want to do something on skincare and you get a dermatologist, or you want to talk about how to, organize your life. You get a professional organizer.
Right.
And if your podcast is just about, entertaining people and giving people a good time, and, have like some friends in your earbuds, which I love that. Then, maybe just get someone who is a professional entertainer, someone who's a comedian or something. I did just put my cat in my lap, just in case anyone caught that.
Yeah, new show about cats that
Yes.
interrupt our interviews. Absolutely. She just wanted to be a part of it, I think.
She did.
She has thoughts on this topic. Cool. Yeah, I'm just checking out. We asked folks earlier what their podcasts are about, and yeah, this is awesome. So sounds like lots of different things going on. Stuff about AI,
Nice.
things for Canadian investors. I love that. Cool. Sweet. And I see folks kind of connecting over their topics, which is awesome. Sweet. We actually had a cool audience question. Do you recommend sending a podcast guest a thank you gift after you interview them?
Oh, that's a really good question. I'm not going to say that, upstart podcasts like absolutely need to do that. It is a super nice gesture. It's not something I've ever done, but I've definitely heard of podcasts doing that, and I think it's just so cool, and I wish I had the resources to do that myself.
Totally.
But yeah, if you can do it.
Totally. And I guess like even if people could start small, it's like amazing what like a little handwritten note or a text
Absolutely.
could go a long way even. So it doesn't have to be anything crazy. But if anybody wants to send me and Ashley a gift after this, let us know.
Hey.
Well, just kidding. Just kidding. Sweet. Okay, I'm curious. What's like the craziest way that you've scored a guest, or maybe like the most creative way that you've scored a guest for one of your podcasts?
I was going to do a live taping at a science conference. And so I wanted to make sure that I had like an awesome guest, that we had an awesome guest. And
yeah,
I knew that one of my very favorite science authors was going to be there. I'm not going to say his name because the end of the story, you'll understand why. And I didn't know how to get a hold of him. And I didn't know, like, I couldn't DM him on Twitter. I didn't have connection. I didn't have, like, I tried reaching out to him on LinkedIn, but he didn't respond.
yeah.
And I was like, how do I really want to get this guy. So what did I ended up doing? On the advice of my husband, actually, credit to him, I sent an email to the guy's first name at firstnamelastname.com. And he responded in like a day and said yes. And so we got this huge name on our podcast that, like, honestly, one of my idols on our podcast. And I just did it by like guessing his email address. So that's so cool. That's actually a very good tip. And you should keep that in your back pocket in case you don't have someone's contact information.
That's amazing. That's like guessing a password, right? That's
so cool. Yeah, it felt that way.
I love that. Wow. Okay. Bookmarking that one for personal use later. Cool. So apart from the amazing stroke of genius from your husband there, what are some other good methods for getting the guest? What would you recommend people try
Yeah.
out?
So one of the most common ways that people do it, especially when they're starting out, is just kind of working from their own network, the people that they know, their friends, their family.
Yeah.
That's a great way to do it, especially if you know someone who's like a good talker. You just have to make sure that the conversation stays on topic and that you don't kind of go off the rails and talk about, the barbecue that you guys had last weekend or whatever.
Right.
If the
Or the
topic
fight
is
from 2005.
yeah, yeah. If you're talking about like Canadian investing and you talking about your dogs, that's not really the greatest episode. But
Yep.
I mean, you can, little things here and there is always fun. But
Totally.
the other way, you can also just Google it. Just if there is a topic that you want to talk about,
Mhm.
Google that topic and see who's written about it, who's podcasted about it, who's done TED Talks about it, and find the person that is the go-to person for that topic,
Totally.
and reach out to them. Obviously, there's always social media. There's LinkedIn. You can search hashtags and find people that are talking about this topic there.
Mhm.
Um, and one of the ways that we did it a lot for Curiosity Daily was PR mailing lists, which is a
Cool.
great thing because once you're on them, they send the guests to you. You don't actually have to do a ton of legwork. The way that you'll get on PR mailing lists is what we did is for publishers. So if you find a book that someone has written that you think is really great, turn it over, look at the publisher, go to the
Mhm.
publisher's website, find their PR people, and just ask to be added to their mailing list. And it's they'll add you, and you will get regular emails saying, "Hey, we have this author who wrote a book on this topic who is open for interviews during this time," and you can respond and be like, "Yeah, that actually sounds like a great guest for my podcast. Let's organize it. Let's set it
Cool.
up." That was always my favorite way to do it. And then you can also, speaking of audience, you can invite other podcast hosts onto your show. That is a
Right.
win-win for both of you. They get in front of a new audience. You get them to talk about their appearance on their show so that their audience comes to see you. That's a great thing. There are also services they're like podcast matching services you can do,
Cool.
where they will send you options of people who are interested in being on podcasts, and you can kind of browse through those options and see if there's anyone that you like. I have found that those are not the greatest like quality personally. I think just for my own
Got it.
the kinds of shows that I do, but for some people it works really well. Um, and then otherwise, like just keep your mind open. I mean, if there's someone cool that you meet at a bar or something where you're like, actually, this person would be a really good conversation, don't don't um don't discount them just because you met them outside of your normal podcast working hours, Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, those are all really great methods. Yeah, I feel like it's a lot of times when we ask somebody to do something like that, like come on a show, we can just think that the answer is going to be no. And I think people really surprise us. Like for like you getting sort of your science idol on, like I'm sure that was like kind of unbelievable, but it's amazing. Like just ask, see what happens is sort of something I've learned along the
Yeah,
way.
people are flattered that you want to talk to them. It's a good thing to
Yeah,
remember. Yeah.
totally. Totally. Awesome. Okay, switching gears. Maybe this is less flattering experiences. Um but so many podcasters, seasoned podcasters will tell the war stories of when an interview has kind of gone bad or had a negative experience with the guest. I'm curious if that's ever happened to you.
Yes, we've definitely on Curiosity Daily, we had a few times where we would have a guest that maybe just wasn't, they were there to talk about their topic, but they were not that great at talking. They weren't really interested in
Sure.
being on mic. They were not interested in talking to us. And that's a challenging thing to get through, but one way that I find can help with those things to kind of help someone open up is first of all, uh, have a conversation with them beforehand. I know it's hard to tell this, once you're already in it, but if you
Yeah.
can loosen them up beforehand and just talk about your day, have a conversation about something completely like not on topic of what you're about to talk about, that can
Right.
really loosen them up and make them feel like they are, just a friend, and that and it not under pressure to be recorded. But then sometimes people will be less interested if you are asking questions that everyone has asked a million times. And
Mm,
we'll get to good questions, but sometimes if it seems like if it seems like an interview is really going downhill, sometimes it's good to just kind of shake things up, ask something really out of left field, ask them
yeah.
what they think the most surprising thing is about their topic, or something that the thing that makes them light up about their job, or something like that, that
Right.
can kind of get them happy again, honestly, because
Right.
sometimes it's
Pique their
just that.
interest.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes I'm sure it feels like they're rinsing and repeating. So,
yeah.
yeah. Cool. Cool. And definitely we will get to that in the next section. Cool. That's a great tip for saving an interview if it's ever seeming like it's headed for a nosedive.
Yeah.
Sweet. So now for the last part of this section, let's talk about like the actual anatomy of a pitch. Like what would you recommend is like the formula for good invitation for someone to be on your pod?
Yeah. So the important thing to remember is that, if this is a high profile figure that you are reaching out to, they are very busy and they don't have a lot of time to read a long email. So you want to keep it
Right.
short, and you want to front load your ask. So even put it in the subject line, like invitation for podcast interview, maybe say the name of your show. Then in the email body itself, you say, "Dear so and so, I would love to have you on my show, blah 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 blah, to
Mhm.
talk about whatever." Then you talk about why you think that they should be on the show, what's in it for them, basically, what's good about your show, who your audience is, what will be beneficial to them for coming on. And then finally, you want to say why you think that they're good for your show, why
Mm,
they are going to benefit you. I know a lot of times at least for me, it's really tempting to start with, "This is why I want you on my show. You've been my idol for so long, and I think you're so great." And this, and like
right.
gushing about them, and that just, you can do that. Just save it for the end and keep it brief. You can do the gushing once you're on camera with them.
Right. Save it for when you're recording.
Yeah.
Totally. Cool. Okay, so sh- recapping here, keep it short and sweet because they're busy. Um, tell them what's in it for them, why they should
Mhm.
come on, and then why you think that they're a good fit. Is that
Yeah,
right?
and importantly, just
Cool.
don't bury the request. Like, the request needs to be front and center of what you want them to do. Yeah.
Totally. Cool. Sweet. Sounds awesome. Okay, last question for me on this section. How do you stay motivated after getting a bunch of no's from your invites?
Yeah. Generally you won't get no's. I mean, you'll get a few,
Mm,
but you'll mostly get
yeses.
silence. It's kind of like
Oh,
dating. You know, you get
not the
ghosted a
ghosting.
lot. Yeah. And
Cool. Yeah.
yeah, it's just, if you believe in your show, if you believe in the topic that you want to do an episode on, I mean, there's always someone else,
Yep.
you really, sometimes there's just that one person, and that kind of stings. But I just recently went through this. There was a topic I really wanted to do for Taboo Science,
Mhm.
and I was reaching out to one researcher who seemed to be the only one who researched this topic, and he just was not getting back to me. And
Mm.
finally, I just was like, "Okay, who else is there?" And I
Yeah.
found someone great who wrote an entire book about the topic, and has been studying it for a really long time. And I just interviewed them, and it was great. It was a great interview. There was no
Cool.
problem. So it's, you just get back on that horse, and if you believe in the project, you'll keep going.
Totally. Yeah. The dating metaphor really works here. There's so
Yeah.
many fish in the sea.
Yes. Yes.
Um, and I liked what you said too about like if you're passionate about it, that like the energy around it will stay. And that's like a really good tip. Like make sure you pick something. Like if you're gonna do a whole podcast about it, spend some time making sure you're in love with the topic so that those no's don't hit as hard as maybe something that I'm sort of taking away. The subliminal message there is make sure you really love this thing.
Definitely.
Cool. Sweet. Just checking the chat. We've got one question from the audience that I think would be good for this section, and then we'll keep moving. Do you ask guests to sign a release before the interview ever?
So on Curiosity Daily, we did because we had an entire, it was our full-time job. We had a legal department. They had us do that. Generally for my own podcast, I don't. And I'm not a lawyer. I don't know if that's good or not.
Yeah.
But I think generally it's not super common for indie podcasts to do that.
Right.
Someone can absolutely correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, so it's up to you. If you want to really cover yourself, like absolutely go ahead. Nobody has ever balked at that when we would do it for Curiosity Daily. So
got it. Yeah. Cool. Sweet. Awesome. Okay. Well, I think we can keep going forward to our next section. And I see lots of people have put some questions in the ask a question section, and we'll save those for the Q&A at the end as well. So awesome. Don't worry, everybody. Cool. Okay. Next section is nailing the interview questions. Same question to start us off. Why is this so important? Why are good interview questions so key?
Because, well, first of all, it's for your own show. Like you want to make sure that you answer the questions that you're interested in, and that you don't that you keep a good that you cover the narrative that you're after.
Yeah.
But also for them, if it's a high profile figure and they've done a lot of interviews, with people who don't know who they are, honestly. Like they've done a lot of interviews with people who haven't read their book or just are, they're a radio DJ who does, an interview every hour and just will run down a list of questions that some assistant wrote. So if you can really know your interview subject and know the things that they're good at answering, you can really make for a good episode and make for an interview that they will want to share.
Totally. Yeah. Cool. What is your method? How do you approach the research and the writing of the questions? And also I'm curious if that's like changed at all as you've gotten more and more like experience being a host and an interviewer.
Yeah, when I first started doing interviews, I believed that in order to have a normal, like a totally casual conversation, I needed to not have any questions written down because I was like, reading a question makes it weird. I don't want to be weird. I'm just going to kind of know what we want to talk about and we'll go in. Totally. That is no longer the way I do it. I do not recommend that method. Now, I do recommend having a casual conversation. Absolutely. Right. But having a list of questions in front of you that you can glance at and know where you are in the conversation and what you need to ask next is very important. It's good to, if you're doing an interview podcast, especially, it's really good to have those interview questions laid out in a way that kind of creates a narrative arc for your episode. You start with the basics and then you get to the most interesting point and then you get to the lessons that they learned or whatever. And so a list of questions is very good. And I highly recommend doing that.
Well, thank God, because I've got a list in front of me. So
good.
Woo! Imagine I'm just freeballing this. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Cool. Yeah. Cool. Okay. Well, with that in mind, what are some of the top tips, in your opinion, for writing a good question?
Yeah, I would, like I said, absolutely research the guest. A really good thing as podcasters, we're not only interested in what they know, what our guest is going to know, but also how they sound and what other people have asked them. And so the best way to figure that out is by listening to other podcasts they've been on and videos that they've done. So like I said, maybe a TED Talk, maybe a YouTube interview. something like that. Definitely just kind of devour as much as you can of what this person has done online.
Yeah.
And then, know what you want to get out of this interview. Just because there are, a sci-fi author, it doesn't mean that you have to ask them about every single book they've written. You can, if there's a specific thing that you're after, feel free to ask it. You don't have to
Yeah.
cover all of the bases. You know what's best for your show, and you can focus on that.
Totally.
But also, keep their goals in mind too. You don't want to, if they have expressed to you that they want to plug something, like definitely, let them plug it. And then you'll also want to start with a question that introduces your guest. Very honestly, the way that I do it is just tell them to introduce themselves, and they will choose the things that they want to talk about. And if they don't mention everything about themselves that I think is important, I will ask about those things. But
Follow up. Yeah.
there are a lot of cool ways to do this, though. You could also say, like, how do you describe your work to people at parties? Or how would you describe your what you do to a 9-year-old or something like that? There are a lot of fun ways to do that. And you want to also, this is super basic 101, don't ask yes or no questions. Keep them open-ended. And so instead of something like, did you always want to be an actor? You could say, when did you first know you wanted to be an actor? That will elicit a story about their childhood. And that's a lot more interesting than just a yes or no or a single word answer.
Totally.
My favorite thing to do, because I interview a lot of scientists, my favorite thing to do is ask really dumb questions. To quote Ali Ward of Ologies, ask smart people stupid questions, because that will get them, if they're a person who speaks at a very high level, very technically, uses a lot of big words. If you ask them a stupid question, they're going to be like, oh my goodness, I need to take pity on this person and really dumb it down for them. But then they say it in a way that that everybody will understand, which is good. So, don't have too much of an ego when you're asking these questions, which actually, that is another piece of advice I would have, is don't ask questions to make yourself look good. That doesn't usually work very well. There's a real temptation to do that. And, you just want to ask questions that are going to be good for your audience and going to get good answers.
Totally.
And then finally, I love to end with the question of, is there anything I didn't ask you that you think is important for people to know? Sometimes they say no. Honestly, most of the time they say no. Well, actually, and then go into like the best anecdote, like, of the entire conversation. And like, that's the thing you use for the promo. So you always want to, you probably didn't cover everything. They have something in there that they want to talk about. So ask if there's anything you forgot. And then finally, ask them if there's anything they want to plug, or any websites they want to go to, that they want people to go to, just so that they can get something out of that too. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Sweet. I'm curious, do you feel like you've gotten naturally better at this over time? Like when you first started out, did it feel a little bit more natural, and then just through practice, it started to feel a little bit easier?
Yes. I wish it was easier than it is now still, but yeah, when I first started, the entire 15 minutes leading up to the interview, my palms were sweaty, my heart was racing, like I was so nervous. And then that nervousness came through in the interview. But then I, over time, like doing this constantly, regularly, I started getting into a flow and realizing that a lot of times they're just as nervous as I am. And so it's kind of my job to make them feel comfortable. And yeah, it really is just a learning experience, just going through, the more you do it, the more comfortable you'll get.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Something I remind myself when I feel nervous about something like that too is just like curiosity, wink, wink, curiosity daily. Curiosity is such a like egoless and relatable trait. Like if you're just interviewing someone, you're interested in them, that's like automatically kind of going to score you some points. So like leaning into that has always kind of made me feel better. So cool.
Yeah,
awesome. I'm curious if there are any interviewers out there or podcasters or talk show hosts that you sort of like looked up to and maybe like studied for inspiration and like the type of interviewer you wanted to be.
Yeah. I mean, I did mention Allie Ward. She is fantastic.
Yeah.
Everyone should check out Ologies. I'm sure it's like the #1 science podcast. So I'm sure if you are into that stuff, you probably have already checked it out. But please do. She's wonderful because she is so personable and relatable and really puts people at ease. So I love her. But also Mark Maron is someone who I really admire in his interviewing style, because again, it's just a conversation, and
Yeah.
he has this really good balance of putting in his own little anecdotes and experiences that, the person has said, maybe reminds, maybe the guest says something that reminds Mark Maron of something that he did once, and so he'll be able to add that, but it's never too much. It never is like suddenly all about him. It's just the kind of
Cool.
thing that people are used to in a conversation. You have a little back and forth, and I love him. And actually, speaking of great interviewers, I will definitely recommend that everyone listen to the podcast The Turnaround with Jesse Thorne.
Cool.
It's a show where he interviews great interviewers about interviewing. So you get people like
Meta.
Terry Gross, Mark Maron, definitely some total legends, and from every walk of life, like every genre of interview show. So you
Cool.
really you get to hear tips from different people, and they're all, a lot of times their approaches are vastly different, and you guys can kind of like pick and choose which ones work for you.
Cool.
Yeah.
What was that called again? The Turnaround?
The Turnaround. Yeah.
And what was the man's name?
Jesse Thorne.
Cool.
He's currently the host of Bullseye, if you're familiar. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. I'm gonna send that in the chat so everybody
Cool.
because I want to check that out.
Yeah, it's
especially if we plan to do more of these. So I got to get better too. Cool. Okay. Amazing. Okay, so we cracked the interview questions. Like now what? What else should people keep in mind for interviewing someone and making it awesome?
Yeah. So you want to, before the interview starts, maybe that day or the day before, send them a nice little reminder email. These people are busy again. And then, I want to make sure that you are on time, preferably, a few minutes early, so that they don't show up to a Zoom or a Squadcast session or something, not knowing what's happening, and kind of being worried that you might have forgotten. You want to check all your equipment, make sure that you have the right microphones, chosen, and all of that stuff.
Yep.
And then, like I said before, you don't want to start the interview immediately. You want to put your guest at ease. You want to talk to them about their day. You want to ask about where they're from or what the weather's like. This is honestly, this sounds like such an obvious and simple thing, but it's actually like the hardest thing of everything about interviewing. This is the hardest thing for me because I get so excited and I just want to ask them. I just want to start, and I've been looking forward to this, and it's really important to just sit there and talk. It doesn't have to be for 15 minutes. You can do like 5 minutes. I have been interviewed by people who will take 20 minutes to talk to me about what's been going on in my life before we even before they even ask the next question, or the first question. So it depends on what kind of person you are. I'm clearly not as sociable as some people, so I keep it shorter, but that's important.
Cool.
And then once you start the interview, you've got those questions in front of you, but don't stick to them like gospel. Let it flow, let the conversation just go where it goes. Keep them in mind, keep your questions in mind, so that when they touch on something that you have written down, you can be like, that's a great segue into this thing that I wanted to ask you. But you don't have to be like, oh no, you're talking about when you started playing baseball, but I actually had this question before about when you, like, just don't, let it go where it goes, and then you can always go back to earlier questions. And then shut up. Like, be quiet. Don't let them talk. avoid a lot of responsive noises that we'll usually do in everyday conversation when you're sitting across someone at a table. But if you're recording yourself, you don't want to have a million mm-hms like to edit out. Um, and also like let there be a little bit of silence at the end of their answers. One, because a lot of the time when we're doing this remotely, it's really hard to tell when someone's done talking. And number two, sometimes giving them that space lets them think of another thing that can actually make the response even better. So just, if like it's hard to do, but just let yourself sit there with it for a minute. And you also don't have to respond to everything that they say too. Sometimes that, a lot of times interviewers can have a tick of like, yeah, oh, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. And then you listen back to yourself and you're like, oh gosh, I say that all the time.
Right.
You can, there, I have heard a wonderful rule of thumb where you can either summarize what they've said, or it was three things. I can't remember what the second thing was, or move on. You can say if the thing that you have to say after their response doesn't add to the response, just move on and ask your next question.
Totally.
But yeah, that's what I would advise.
Cool. The leaving the space one is so important and something I struggle with so much. And our colleague Ryan has the wonderful 7-second rule. I don't know if you've ever been in a meeting where he does that, but he'll just be like, count to 7 seconds in my head, and has like the biggest smile on his face. And I'm just like, oh, somebody say something.
I've been in meetings with Ryan and I didn't know that was why he did that. There's always like an awkward silence. But it works. It works. Someone always is like, actually, I did have a thought, and it's always
right.
good.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm certainly learning from him. That's just a great reminder for sure. Also, everybody in the chat is being so supportive. I love the podcast community, like giving each other ideas and sharing thoughts. It's awesome to see. So thanks everybody for helping each other. We have one more section to cover, and then we'll jump into audience Q&A. So remote recording is last. Ashley, how do we not let our guests' audio suck?
Well, I feel like I have to start this with a plug for Descript Studio Sound, just because we're here. We're right.
Yep. We got to
kind of our point of view on Creator HQ is that there's a lot of equipment that you can get to sound good and to make your guests sound good. But at the end of the day, if that stuff doesn't work, Studio Sound is your friend. You can record. You can use your laptop mic and a terrible Zoom recording and put that through Studio Sound, and you can get a really good result. So that is like just, that's in your back pocket this whole time. But a good thing to remember is that listeners are usually more forgiving of a guest's audio quality than a host's audio quality. So make sure that your audio quality is like up to snuff.
Yep.
And, and if your listener is, if your guest is on AirPods, maybe they'll be a little bit more forgiving. But a good thing to do is just talk about equipment with the guest before you do the interview. In your email, inviting them, once they've said yes, include a line about like how to record the best quality, make sure that you say, so you sound the best, so the listeners can get the best version of you. And some of those things you can do are, please use an external microphone, not AirPods. And please be in a room that isn't too echoey, maybe a room that has a lot of pillows and curtains and things like that, and not cats. I don't know if you can still hear her.
Every once in a while.
Yeah.
She's just helping us keep time,
Yeah. And I talked to for Creator HQ, I talked to the main audio engineer on 20,000 Hertz, the podcast, and
Oh, cool.
he always dedicates the first 10 minutes of every interview to tech setup. So you've got some time dedicated to chatting, you've got some time dedicated to tech setup. Some of that can kind of combine. But just to make sure, like, if you're doing a video component, you want to make sure that they look good, and the audio component, you want to make sure that they're on the correct microphone. Sometimes what I'll do is, if they have a nice microphone and it doesn't sound like it's coming through, I'll have them tap it. And if I don't hear the tap, I'm like, oh, you got to check the right microphone. There are all sorts of different ways. But just don't be afraid to ask the guest to make adjustments, because this is in both of your best interests.
Right. Totally. Yeah. Yeah. So sometimes it sounds like hand holding with the guest is okay.
Yeah. You're the expert. You're the expert in sound when it comes to you and a guest, unless you're interviewing, the sound engineer for 20,000 Hertz, and then
right.
But yeah.
Totally. Yeah. I guess a good reframe is, it's your job to put them at ease and to make them feel comfortable. So
absolutely. Yeah.
Take that and run with it. Cool. Okay, so you mentioned remote recording. I know you said Zoom and Squadcast. What do you like to use, and do you have any other recommendations for remote recording platforms?
I used to use Zoom not only for my own podcast, but for Curiosity Daily. We would use that for every interview. Actually, we used Skype before the pandemic. That was like our main one. I don't know. And then, everyone started using Zoom, so we used that. And Zoom is fine. Zoom, everyone knows Zoom. Everyone's very comfortable with Zoom. It just doesn't get the best audio quality. It's very compressed. Sometimes there is, they'll have sound cancellation and stuff, so that you don't have echoes and things like that. It's just not the best for a recording setup. Right. So what you want to do is use a platform that is designed for remote recording, like Squadcast or Riverside, where it will actually, in these platforms, it will actually record both people remotely. So you're not getting the signal from them and then recording it here with all the glitches. Right. And then it uploads it to the cloud, and it's all sorts of nice technology that makes the audio sound much, much better than it would over Zoom. So that's definitely my best recommendation.
Cool. Yeah. Amazing. Sweet. Okay. We got through all of my questions that I had prepped, which means it's audience question time. Yay. So folks, jump into the Ask a Question section, and I will pull up your questions on screen. There's a few that I've got loaded up here. Cool. So first one, how would you suggest landing a guest with a large audience if you're new and can't offer them a large platform in return? That's such a good question.
It's a great question. And and I've dealt with that myself, starting a new podcast. What I had to do is, there are a few different reasons that someone will come on a show. I mean, one of them is a large audience, but there are a lot of other reasons. If it's going to be a good conversation, if you're asking them about something that they're really passionate about and maybe they don't get asked about all the time, that's a great reason for someone to come on a show. You can also talk yourself up. So if you're known in your field for something, even if your podcast is brand new, talk about that, make that the reason that they should come on to talk to you. There are a lot of different reasons for someone to want to talk to you, and it's just about finding those and really, and letting them know what they are. And in the end, just try. Just sometimes people will say yes. Sometimes people don't really care about a big audience. Sometimes people are flattered to be on the first episode of a brand new show. So just try it out.
Totally. Love that. Cool. Next up, we talked about tech stuff, remote recording, related topic. What are your thoughts on sending a mic to a guest to ensure they have quality equipment?
Yeah, this is something that 20,000 Hertz does when,
Cool.
From that interview. And if you have the resources to do that, that's a great way to do it. Now, the interesting thing is, so I actually, on the American Geophysical Union interviews, that's what they did. They would use a website that would rent equipment and would ship microphones to the guest. And what I found was, even if they had good equipment, it was still super important to coach them on how to use it, because
Yep.
if you have a fancy microphone that is this far away, it's not going to sound great. It's not going to, I'm going to repeat myself just in case you didn't get it, but it's not going to sound great if it's really far
Yep.
away. And so it's still super important to coach them on how to use it. But yeah, if you have resources, that's a fantastic way to get good audio for sure.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, I had to learn that lesson with the mic placement the hard way. So
Yeah.
definitely true. Awesome. Cool. Hi, I work as a guest manager and I always do the initial briefing calls with the guest. I'm still very new to the podcast theme. So what advice would you give people like me to get more out of the guests?
Yeah. So I'm that's actually something we didn't even cover, was the pre-interview, which sounds like is what you do, where you call a guest and you kind of talk to them about their, ask them some preliminary interview questions, but maybe not the interview questions, and get some information about them that you can then give to the podcast host to ask better questions. And yeah, that's a great, I mean, everything that I said here still applies about, making them feel comfortable in a pre-interview. You can be even more casual. Really, the idea is just to find out if they're a good talker, if they're going to be good on mic, and
Right.
to uncover some interesting things that the interviewer can ask. And so in this case, you can actually ask some things like, do you have any funny stories about blah? Or do you, what's the thing that surprises people most about what you do? And really get to just the things that are most interesting about them, without having to do a full arc of an interview. Yeah. But that's a
Awesome.
great thing to do. I would say, for regular indie podcasters, a pre-interview can be a really good thing. Sometimes it's more time than a guest wants to spend with you, which is fine. Like, you don't have to do it. And
Right.
I myself don't do pre-interviews, but it can be really good for you.
Totally. Yeah, I feel like if there's a lot of interviews out there with this person already, you can probably get a pretty good gist of yeah. Cool. This one's from YouTube. Someone can we charge to interview guests?
Can you charge to interview guests? I mean, I know there are shows out there that do that.
Yeah.
And if people will pay it, all the power to you. It's not something I've ever done, and it's definitely something that is not, as far as like journalistic podcasts, they would never do that. But if you're talking about, a show that is a promotional vehicle for the guests, I mean, I could see how there would be a reason. I mean, you can. There's nothing unethical about that. Should you? That's up for argument. I don't know.
Totally. Cool. Love this question that I'm about to pull up here. What are the pros and cons of sharing interview questions with the guest in advance? Or is that just something you should do automatically?
That's a great question.
Really good question.
Because there are pros and there are cons. I've done it a few times when people specifically ask, and I would say that there are more cons than pros. Because what happens when you share interview questions with the guest ahead of time is that a lot of times they'll type out their answers and then they will read them to you on the microphone. And that is not a fun interview.
Yep.
So a better way to do it that I've found is write out your interview questions, kind of get a sense of the themes you're going for, and tell them what you'll be talking about, but not the individual questions you'll be asking. So they can still feel comfortable and do their prep, but they aren't, preparing something rote to read to you.
Right. Got it. That makes a lot of sense. Cool. We're getting a lot of questions about promotion, which is making me think that we should do an entire episode on this.
Yeah.
But would love to hear your initial thoughts on this. I know it's a big, juicy topic, but like, how do you maybe promote your podcast? What do you think is the best method?
Yeah. So this is something that I am trying to get better at this year. That's like my New Year's resolution, is to get better at promoting myself. But having a high profile guest on is a really good opportunity to get your podcast out there, because that person has a large audience and they can share it with them. I once had a really big name podcaster on Curiosity Daily, and for a year afterward, people were telling me that they found Curiosity Daily through that show. So it definitely can be good for you. A good way to get this is an interview tutorial. So if we're talking about promotion through an interview, a good way to get your guests to promote you is to make it super, super easy for them. So send an email after the interview, or maybe right before the episode goes up. Tell them when the episode's going up. Sometimes you can give them a little formula for a tweet or a LinkedIn post that they can share, so that they don't have to
Right.
think too hard. But just reminding them that the episode's coming out, and to ask them to post to their followers or to mention on their show will go a long way. So that's a great way to they're human too. They'll forget. And so just making it as easy as possible for them to share your show with their audience is good.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah. So hopefully that answers. There's a few questions about that, but we will take this as an idea for a future.
Yeah.
Future. Yeah. There's another great question about like any thought on engaging listeners from sign up through tracking and email and all of that stuff. So I think it's a big juicy topic that we can for sure save. So
Definitely
stay tuned for more. Amazing. Okay, maybe last question before we do some closeout. If there's one thing you could go back and tell yourself on day one of your pod journey, what would it be?
What a lovely question. You're a good interviewer, whoever that is. Gosh, I think I would tell myself that I am just as worthy as anyone else doing a podcast, and I'm just as worthy as anyone else who's interviewed this guest. So not to feel intimidated, or to feel like I'm not allowed to, take the big swings.
Yep.
I think that is what I would tell myself. Still something I'm trying to remember,
That's beautiful. I love that. I feel like that's important for like even just taking the jump and starting the podcast. I think it's like you said earlier, like 1 million new podcasts every year or something. Like it can feel like, why should I get to do this thing when so many other people are doing it? And it's like, man, life is about doing stuff. This is what it's all about. So
Absolutely.
I love that.
Yeah.
And everybody in the chat, you're worthy too. And we're so lucky that you spent this hour with us. This has been so fun. I see some technical questions about like studio sound and things like that. Could not recommend our help center enough for checking that out. Somebody asked like if you should turn it on before you're recording or like after.
Definitely after. Yeah.
Yeah. So you just apply it afterwards in Descript.
And then you can tweak it. Yeah. Once you do that.
Yeah, the intensity filter and all that good stuff. Amazing. Well, this has been a blast. Ashley, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing all of your wisdom today.
Thank you. And thank you so much for all the great questions to everyone out there, and your great questions, Christiana. You're a lovely interviewer. I enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. It's been so fun. You have your 3rd season coming up of a podcast. You're in the podcasting community. Where do you want people to listen or to find you after this? What can we plug?
So I'm most active on Twitter. I'm at Smashlyhamer. It's my name with an SM at the beginning. Cool. And Taboo Science. It's the trailer is out now, and you can listen to the archives anytime. It is out on all of your favorite podcast apps. So
amazing. Cool. Well, I will for sure be listening. And yeah, everyone, this is recorded. Like we said, it'll be up on YouTube truly right now. And we'll also send it to you in a follow-up email. And I know I promised a month of free pro. If you're new to Descript, there's your code for that. If you want a new AI powered magical, I'm biased, but it's magical editor, try out Descript. And we will also send you a link in the follow-up email, so it's easy peasy for you. Cool. This has been a blast. Thank you all so much. To see more of Ashley and her team's awesome work, please check out Creator HQ. And last but not least, I'm going to set a poll live for you to give us feedback on how you think this event went. So please fill that out. We hope to do more of these, so that will be super helpful for us getting to do those. So I think that's it from us. Have an amazing day. Ashley, thank you again, and I'm excited to keep doing these with you.
Yay! All right,
Awesome.
bye everyone.
Bye everyone. Have a great